Hi. All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our webinar on Azure Synapse Analytics, Accelerate Time to Insight. My name is Jesper Olsen. I'm a program manager here at FyrSoft. And today we'll be going through main presentation here on Azure Synapse. Now, let me just get this particular thing up. There we go. So the agenda for today is quite simple, really. I'll be going over some individual house rules just for starters, and then I'll be going into a brief introduction to FyrSoft if this is the first time you're engaging with us. And then I'll be introducing our actual speakers because it won't be me all day today. We'll be having we're being joined by our partner at Microsoft, Ahmed Sherif, and then Prasad Paluri, who's a director at Cloud Services, but I'll get to that in a second. Ahmed will specifically go into the introduction about Synapse, like general introduction, the ins and outs of it. And then later on in the presentation, Prasad will be going into more in-depth case studies of our actual implementation and case studies of Azure Synapse that we've been working with. Finally, at the end of the session, we'll be going into a Q&A section where we will be answering as many questions as we can. Right, so back to the house rules. Very simple. You should have a feed out to the right of your screen, where you're basically allowed to ask any questions that you want, and that will be put into a feed that when our speakers are not speaking, then they'll generally be maintaining that specific section and answering your questions as we move along. And then we'll be trying to pick up as many of those questions at the end of the webinar. Furthermore, this particular session is recorded, so this will be available post the webinar. So let me get into the FyrSoft introduction real quick and get to the meat of things. So just as a brief overview, like FyrSoft in itself is a Microsoft shop. Like we pride ourselves on working with Microsoft, and we do everything we can in order to maintain our gold competencies within the Microsoft ecosystem. We've been a cloud partner of the year twice in a row, and we have a massive experience working with numerous enterprises in all sizes and forms. And what everything really revolves around is creating that competitive edge in these, let's say, rather trying times, and make sure that everything is according to your specific plan. With respect to our in-house capabilities, we do have like an extraordinary amount of consultants that are ready to give you guys a hand at any time. Furthermore, like just a couple of examples of some of the partnerships that we also have at the site, like Oracle, SAP, you name it. Like there's hardly anything that we can't do here at FyrSoft. The main focus areas that we work with for Microsoft is generally situated around these three areas of modern work and security, Azure, and applications and data, such as SAP on Azure, Azure Synapse. Azure Arc has been actually quite huge in the education area or vertical. But basically, within these three areas, we do more or less everything. And just to illustrate that some of our customer list are like, it really spans from being large customers to medium enterprises to small corporations, because when it comes to data and data in itself, the data challenges are generally always the same. It doesn't matter whether you're a large or a small company, so we'll take very good care of any customer in this regard. But to the meat of things, enough of me, to the people that we want to talk to today. These are the two speakers of the day. We have the CSA architect, Ahmed Sherif, and also Prasad Paluri. As I mentioned, Prasad Paluri will be introducing himself later on when we get to the case studies and the actual implementations. And then I would like to give the word over to Ahmed, who is like one of the best Synapse people that I've worked with, like hands down. And yeah, Ahmed, you can just take it over, take the presentation over, and go for it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jesper. And thank you all for joining. It's a privilege for me to be speaking with one of our top partners with Microsoft, FyrSoft. Just a little bit about myself very quickly. I am a cloud solution architect with Microsoft in the One Commercial Partner team. I used to work directly with the customers. Now I work with our partners, helping enable our customers. And really, if you know anything about Microsoft, you know that we really depend on our partners to help take our solutions that we have developed initially in Microsoft, the first level, and then we hope for our partners to take them and build amazing solutions on top of that. I come primarily from a data science background before I joined Microsoft, and since then I have been working a lot, especially on the analytics and AI space. And what I have noticed is that more and more the data warehousing, BI, traditional analytics is becoming more ingrained with the advanced analytics and AI solutions, and that can be daunting to some of our partners who are looking for more of a segue into that field. And so Synapse really gives you that opportunity to do so. And so I'm very excited to be talking about Synapse today, and how it can help sort of enable you and sort of remove that wild west feeling that you have by being in the cloud and being able to see where everything is being located. So I'm going to focus primarily today on the high level structure of what Synapse is and how it can help you just from a people level. What are the services that it can provide you? And Prasad, who is my counterpart in this presentation, is going to go more into the deep diving and some of the solutions they've already built with this with Synapse. Being one of our partners, they've had the opportunity to work with Synapse early on and really provide feedback to us at Microsoft in terms of what we can do to make this product even better. So analytics and AI, if you know anything about it, it's really the #1 investment opportunity that the leaders in every organization are looking for. Unfortunately, I can tell you, as coming from a data science background, a lot of the projects that leverage AI, data science, machine learning do not ever see the light of day in production, and most of them fail. They fail for a myriad of reasons, but really they fail because there are just too many folks working in silos, and it takes too long for the implementation of a project to get into fruition. By that time, you've already seen things change in the industry, and even the users, the client, will have forgotten what they've asked for by the time that time period is done, and they've moved on to something else. And so what we've seen at Microsoft is a lot of that has to do with the cloud has become both a good and bad for that type of enablement. It's great because you have endless services at your disposal. You can call services when you need them. You don't have to pay for something you're not going to use. But it's also created that dilemma where there's just so much vastness out there for services that it's just sometimes hard to understand who has been working where, and to avoid that replication of workloads that may be that may be counterproductive towards bringing down your costs. Most of the time, what we see is the two types of workloads, which is your big data versus your relational workloads. Your big data would be the stuff that your data scientists, your data engineers are going to want to use, storing that unstructured data or semi-structured data, never really knowing if you're going to need it, but just knowing you want to store it somewhere. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, if I told you that social media data would be important to your organization, you probably would laugh at me. But nowadays, people collect Twitter data daily and they store it. They may never use it, but they're storing it because one day they might. That's sort of your data lake approach, where you're putting stuff in a file structure. Some of that data is structured, some of it's unstructured. It's not necessarily governed yet. It has not been procured. Contrast that with more of your relational data approach, where you've got your traditional data warehousing, your business intelligence that has not been touched or changed within the last few years, but it provides a consistent reporting analytics workflow on a day-to-day basis. There's becoming more of a need to combine those two together and create more of a seamless integration, so that your business analyst and your data scientist and your data engineer and your VP of analytics can all be working together within one unified platform and seeing everything that's been provisioned, seeing where all the data sources land, moving stuff from a data lake to a data warehouse to a BI report. All that can be seamless, and that's where Azure Synapse Analytics really comes into play. So I'm going to focus on a couple of areas, but really it's going to be coming down to, within Synapse, you have initially it was supposed to be sort of a revisioning of your SQL data warehouse, and the next generation of the Azure SQL data warehouse. But it's really becoming even a lot more than that, because it's really taking the data warehouse and taking it to a whole new level in terms of scalability, collaborativeness, security, monitoring, all that together. So what I want to focus on are these 4 areas here, which is the limitless scale in terms of paying for what you need and having that availability at the touch of a button if you need to scale up or scale out. The insights that you can get quickly without having to extract the data locally somewhere and doing a report in Excel. Sometimes the data is just too big to fit into an Excel spreadsheet. You can get some of that reporting needs very quickly. Also, everything is within one framework. You don't have your data lake storage in one area, your compute in another area, your notebooks in the 3rd area, your data visualizations in a 4th area, and then you have to go look and see where they are provisioned and jumping from page to page to page. You get that unified experience. And because you have that unified experience, it's a lot easier to secure and lock down what's in the cloud, so that you don't have somebody going rogue and building something somewhere that you're not aware of. That repeats the effort that's needed to do something, and secondly, it's going to incur more costs. So this is what we call the provision the data warehouse with the on-demand query as a service. These 4 areas here will give you the ability to do both of these. With the limited scale, it's sort of a reimagining of how we build out the data warehouse. We're used to having to deal with, if you knew you needed a certain data warehouse for a new project, you would have to go out and provision the compute and the resources with the infrastructure a year in advance, and you'd probably be overestimating what you would need because you'd rather err on the side of caution. So you end up paying in advance for services and resources that you may or may not ever need. Additionally, you're not really knowing if you need to scale up or scale out in terms of, are you going to be doing things requiring more engines, or do you need a bigger engine total? Depending on the workload, you just don't know now. With data science, what we've known is that data science is an experimentation loop. And so you're constantly experimenting, you're constantly trying new things. There isn't any particular workflow or methodology or rhyme and reason. Sometimes it's trial and error, and trial and error can be expensive if you've already provisioned resources ahead of time. So you really want to optimize your workload performance. And Synapse gives you that ability to scale up and out with just a click of a button. Because you're able to provision with what you need, you're also able to only pay for what you need. And in the process, we found that Azure Synapse Analytics is a lot more cost efficient than some of our competitors out there on the market. And so you can really be getting the best of both worlds, where you're getting a more of a unified interface along with better costs feedback. The other thing that you find that, or the next step in the process, is you're able to integrate some of the BI workloads with the machine learning drivers that are available within Azure Synapse. And what this does is it helps the data scientist and the data engineer and the data analyst all be collaborating in one simple unified framework. This is important for several reasons. First, it allows for an overlap of work and responsibilities so that folks can be working within each other and they can understand what the other person is needing. And secondly, it also allows for it allows for you the ability to create backups for your roles. If everybody is working within a framework that they understand and they see each other, they're more likely to understand the frustrations of what they're going through, and they're able to help them out as opposed to working within their own silos. And this allows you to sort of build a more end-to-end analytics infrastructure. If you have collaboration between the different players in your analytics workspace, you're going to have a more unified analytics experience overall. And this will then allow you to do, because you have that, you also will have the ability to create a better opportunity to monitor and manage your this wild west of a cloud infrastructure, because you're going to understand what resources somebody needs versus what they don't. And so therefore you don't give an analyst the ability to create a cluster for a Spark job, but you may give them the ability to leverage one that's already running to view a report, and maybe give the ability to create these clusters to the data engineers and the data scientists instead. This is something that you're able to do a lot easier when you see everything that's available to you in one unified portal. And ultimately, this brings us to our unified experience, which is it takes really Azure Synapse, all it's really done is it's just taking the ability to all of the services that we've already had. We already had Azure Machine Learning SDK and Machine Learning Studio. We already had Power BI and Data Warehouse, Azure Data Warehouse and Azure Database and Azure Cosmos DB. We've already had Azure Blob Storage and Azure Data Lake. We just now have them in a unified framework and interface that allows you to see everything all at once that's being provisioned. And this ultimately is what Azure Synapse brings, in my opinion, the greatest value to the users and to the organizations that leverage them. And we have many organizations who are starting to leverage Azure Synapse Analytics, and they're getting much more return on their investment because they're with that unified interface. You have increased customer satisfaction, lower total cost of ownership because fewer folks are now working in a sort of a rogue or isolated environment. You have fewer repetition of the same workloads over and over again, and you end up getting more bang for your buck on the cloud. Azure Synapse Analytics just went generally available last week. It was publicly available for a while, and a lot of customers, Microsoft, have already been using them. A lot of these customers have been working with FyrSoft. FyrSoft has taken the lead within Microsoft of working with our engineering team, ironing out the kinks, coming back with feedback in terms of things that need to be improved and enhanced. And because of that, they've had a head start in working with FyrSoft, working with Microsoft as FyrSoft to get this up and running for a lot of our customers. And they're going to be talking about that next. So I'm going to hand it off to my colleague, Prasad, who's the Director of Analytics at FyrSoft, and he will start to let you guys know a little bit of what they've been doing with Azure Synapse. Prasad, it's all yours.
You're muted, Prasad, just FYI.
Okay, sorry guys. Thank you, Ahmed. Really appreciate the introduction here. Thank you everyone for taking time to join the webinar today. As introduced by Jesper and Ahmed, I'm Prasad Paluri from FyrSoft, managing our cloud services, and I'll be primarily focusing on the data and AI practice. Today, I'll be walking through a couple of scenarios or case studies of how Synapse has helped us to accelerate the time to insights. So let's jump on. So before I start on the case studies, I thought I would present a slide about how we approach data modernization of data estates for our customers or partners. So we broadly see two types of adoption here. Either customers build a new system to replace an existing system, more of a greenfield scenario, or they choose to get into a migrate scenario. The migrate scenario is more depending on the partner or customer, depending on how much they want to invest on, how much risk they want to take, how much effort they want to do. We approach with multiple approaches here. Either we do the rehost, which is more a lift and shift of their infrastructure from on-prem to the cloud. If you have SSIS, SQL Server Integration Service, or Analysis Service, Reporting Service, we lift and shift all those infrastructure to the cloud as a VM. So that kind of eliminates the need for managing and scaling the VM needs. One thing that we see from our partners is once they rehost, the next set they want to do is replatform. Replatform is like more lift and reshape, where we determine the new platform, like we determine what the new platform is going to be and only change the underlying platform and make sure that we are not rewriting the entire code set, which I'll be covering how Synapse helps in replatforming the current SQL technologies. And some customers are ready to do refactor, where they want to rewrite some of their components and decouple some of their applications without major re-architect. And some customers, very rarely we have seen with Synapse, is like they want to completely rewrite their application and change their architecture. They choose to go into the greenfield scenario. So having said this context, I would like to jump on 3 case studies today. So let me talk about the case studies here. Here today I'll be covering 3 different case studies what we have implemented on Azure Synapse. One is greenfield, working along with Microsoft. One of the challenges we had is like they had huge amount of data that's coming in. We are talking about close to 2.4 terabytes of data that needs to be loaded every time. Within like every run that we do into Synapse. And the other challenge we had is to provide those real-time analytics, not only for your internal customers, but also to provide it through a public API. So where you are able to hit like hundreds of concurrent requests and able to serve that request. We leveraged Synapse Spark Pool and we leveraged hyperindexing. I'll be going through that. The next scenario we looked at is more on the manufacturing and healthcare industry, where they took more conservative approach, like they choose the migration path and based on consulting with the partner. What we did is we did rehost their application, lift and shifted their infrastructure into the Azure cloud first, and then we re-platform that into more Synapse platform. So what happens with that is like there's a very low investment in terms of the effort, the skill, the time, and the risk it took for us to migrate somebody into Synapse. And also there is an immediate value add we were able to provide in terms of reducing their OpEx and also increasing their application health. We are able to tremendously increase their reliability for their application without increasing their OpEx for those industries. So when I go through the migration scenario, I'm going to talk about one of the manufacturing industry we work with. They had around like 150 database, multiple repository, each team owned their own repository, and how Synapse helped with multiple connectors. I'll be talking about that. And the next one is about healthcare, where they had like external systems. These were not internal, but they had external systems that they had to interface with and get those data and also provide quick insights and more intelligence on their data. So I'll be covering those 2 scenarios today as well. Let me jump on to the first use case. Here, we work with a team within Microsoft called CCM Cloud Cost Management Team. The team is responsible of collecting all the usage metrics across the globe, and their system was more batch processing, which has to go through multiple layers of different data platforms. They have to build on data lake, and the customer data was not available for to be exposed to through an API to the customer for at least like a 24-hour period. So one of the challenges we took when we took on Synapse was to how do we reduce the latency of providing this data and made it more available to the data to the customers. So we were looking at how do we reduce the number of hops the data has to take within building one data lake after another data lake. So the other challenge we addressed in this scenario was also to have a concurrent system where data is loading on one side, and we are able to serve the customers API through an API in real time when the load is happening. So that is one other challenge we did implement. So let me quickly go through their previous system. So the customer usage data was coming in. They use Spark on HT Insight. They process the data on Azure Data Lake, and then they had to go with another HT Insight job to process the job. They run every 4 hours, and they process the the data into the blob, and then take the data into SQL, which is needed for reporting and available to the external customers. So what we did here is so to give a quick insight, how much of data we are looking at, around 300 GB to 2.4 terabytes of data every time we load the data into Spark. So this is a kind of a huge data set. And how much data are the customers querying? The customers are querying around at least on an average 50,000 rows concurrently every second, which is around like 50 MB of data that has to be retrieved from our data repository. So what we did is we replaced the middle layer with Synapse, Azure Synapse. So as Ahmed said, Synapse comes with Spark pool, which allows you to bring all this structured, unstructured, and semi-structured and unstructured data, which allowed us to pull the data from the data lake. So we were able to create multiple jobs, one job for loading the data, and one job, if you look at on the right side, we are able to provide through an API, and customers are able to query, and then they're able to get through the Azure blob. I would like to share some of the facts of how this Synapse has performed or exceeded our expectations. So the amount of time it takes to load the 300 GB or 2.4 GB into the Spark was around 10 seconds to load the data. It was very consistent whether you're loading a 300 GB data or a 2.4 terabytes of data into the Spark pool. We were using 200 node cluster, and it was very consistent. We didn't see any scaling of increasing in number of time it took to load the data. And once the data is loaded, we also employed the hyperspace indexing, working with the Microsoft team. They enabled us to use hyperspace indexing within the Spark pool. Indexing took around like 15 minutes, even though the data load took only 10 seconds. Indexing took 15 minutes, which we are continuing to improve upon. But what it did is it improved the query time for the APIs drastically. It used to take 10 minutes for the API to pull the data from Spark pool. But right now it takes around 500 milliseconds, that's half a second, to pull like 500 rows of data into the API. So it kind of tremendously improved the performance. Like we decided to take advantage of hyperspace indexing within the Spark pool, because the number of queries we run concurrently is around like 100 queries we run concurrently in our Spark view. So that kind of taking advantage of that. So what we do is we parallelly load the data, and then and then we create a view, and then we switch. Once we index is created, it takes around like 15 minutes to load the data and create the index, and then we switch the view so that the APIs can serve a concurrent request at the same time. So here is something we did, like the customer data comes from, this is kind of going through a quick overview of our system architecture. The customer APIs were handled through the Azure Service Bus for message queues. The message queue were triggering a function, and then the function was directly calling into the job of the Spark job, providing the request into the Spark job. And then once in terms of data loading, we were actually loading the data in a background where without interrupting the service to the customer. So there is 99.99% availability for the customers to query the data, and have like high response time. At the same time, we were able to query, build and take another job and build the view so that we can seamlessly context switch whenever we load the data into the Synapse Spark pool. So we had two separate pipelines. One is serving the data and one for refreshing the batch. And once the batch is loaded into the memory, we were indexing the job and creating a post view for pre-processing. So once the processing is done, we kind of switch the context there. And I would recommend using hyperspace indexing because it kind of which showed a drastical improvement, like somewhere around 5 to 10x of improvements at least, and it reduced the query time by at least more than half. So to summarize the overall benefits of what we gained by doing the Azure Synapse, we didn't need to go into multiple services like getting into HD Insight and Azure Data Lake and other blobs. So it kind of the unified experience made things much easier. We were able to handle a large amount of data set. Like we had to test Synapse because you might have heard it's GA recently. So we went through a rigorous test in loading large amount of data sets, and we were able to successfully load, and we were able to consistently do that. In terms of it reduces the complexity, it also reduced the, I'll talk a little bit about how it kind of saved money and then also made it easy to develop. And as Ahmed said, they also have this automatic scaling feature so that you can enable on your Spark pool that allows you to only pay for what you use. You are not paying for the clusters you create, but when those clusters are being run, that's when you try to pay, that's when you get billed for those clusters. And then there is this, the pipelines, the ETL Synapse data pipelines allows you to do all the ETL process, which is similar to your Azure Data Factory. And also there's a good integration of ML job directly into the Synapse pool and Synapse Spark pool and SQL pool, which allowed us to provide some insights into the usage data as well. Now, I'm going to go into the next case study. This is with one of our customers who have been working with more than 10 years. They decided to modernize their data platform. They've been on-prem. They have one of the challenges, the data set was limited. They had 4 terabytes of data. And then one of the challenges, they had 50 plus databases, and they had 150 plus SSIS jobs, which was kind of a nightmare for them to migrate into a modern data warehouse. They were evaluating multiple products. They didn't want to rewrite their entire jobs, so they were evaluating multiple data warehouses there. A couple of issues they had. They were using Affinity, and they were more on the on-prem system in their data center, and it was very hard for them to scale because the data was growing and they were collecting data from different sources. So this is one of a scenario where it explains. So their data was more on SAP, HANA and BW. The BW was not able to provide as powerful insights as Power BI. So they had to bring all the data into the SQL server through SSIS, and they also had SSIS and SSRS for reporting as well. The other data sources they had was more on PeopleSoft, which was backed by Oracle, and they also had some data set in SharePoint and also in the flat files. So one of the first thing we did part of this migration was to rehost their platform. We took the middle layer, like bring in all their SAP and Oracle PeopleSoft stayed in the data center, but we were able to move their rehost, lift and shift their SSIS and integration service and analysis service successfully into the Azure cloud. And then we were able to connect to their Power BI. That was the first step that we took. And then the next step we did was to have the ability, like take advantage of Azure Synapse, where it comes with the 90 plus connectors. It has like 5 plus connectors for SAP. It connects to all the different repository into the SAP, HANA and BW. And we were able to build those pipelines and get those data into the tables within Synapse Spark, and we were able to build those analytics on Spark and have that output sent back to the output tables and have more insights provided through Power BI. So this kind of simplified, like it reduced the cost of instead of running it more on a VM. Now it made it as a PaaS service for them. It reduces the overall OpEx, and there was less learnability because of how the technology is integrated between the SSIS and the pipelines within Synapse, and also ability to operate, bring in most of their stored procedures without having to rewrite them and getting into a complicated technology where they're able to migrate it without much of the overhead of rewriting their stored procedures. They had to do a little bit of conversion in converting their the DLLs into EXEs and change some of their inline queries into more stored procedures. Beyond that, it was very easy to migrate in terms of migrating their 150 SSIS jobs into Synapse. So when we work with partners, these are the different things we assess because when customers have their data platform, they care about different things. They care about how well the system connects with external data source. As I said, Synapse was great. They had 90 plus connectors. They had good connectors that connects with Oracle and SAP. And the next thing is how do we do ETL orchestration? So Synapse pipelines have all the capabilities that Azure Data Factory has. It can run your SQL stored procedures, your Spark jobs, .NET Core, PowerShell commands, and then so those are the advantage there. So in terms of scheduling, Synapse pipeline have like triggers, so which can triggers or can be also be time based. So you can set up triggers for scheduling within Synapse when you migrate from SSIS into the Synapse pipeline. In terms of disaster recovery, Synapse automatically creates the restore points, so you can create them manually. Also, it helps to back up, create before a large modification of data. So the restore points happen in the background process, so the data is still available for you, and the restore points are very much incremental backups. In terms of operations support, any failures in the pipeline or triggers, you can actually view those within the Synapse pipelines for every run. So we can actually you can also manually re-trigger those runs within the Synapse pool. In terms of monitoring, Synapse also comes with a feature to monitor without having to get into another service. And as Ahmed said, security has been a huge focus for Synapse. In addition to multiple Azure levels of security that's already built in, Synapse provides a granular level of security through a row level security and dynamic data masking. So those are some of the features that kind of differentiates Synapse compared to the other products that are available. And having that ability to connect your machine learning to the underlying blob, whether it's a semi-structured or an unstructured data, Synapse kind of differentiates in terms of how you can run your ML jobs within Synapse Spark without having to move your data outside of and then store it into a different repository. In terms of learnability, if you're familiar with SQL Server, you can easily adapt to the Synapse SQL pools. And if you're familiar with Databricks or HD Insight Spark, you can run the same thing within the Synapse Spark pool as well. And in terms of performance, Ahmed already mentioned that it outperforms all the competitors in the market. So the third use case is more around we built for healthcare. One of the challenge with this healthcare was they had like so many external data set. Customers, there was so much redundancy in the data that they were pulling in. It was really complicated. They had this solution within their data center. Moving on, like, so they had for all the hospital data, they call it operation census. They had a system called point click care, and to collect all the contract employees, they have Paylocity, and then for timekeeping, they have AOD. So it was really complicated to maintain, get data, and then synchronize all the data within the data set. So the previous system was all on-prem. The point-click care was replicated into a file share with all the log data, and then they were restoring that log data within SQL Server 2016, and then they were pulling all this data through SSIS and putting it into a staging database, and then they were transforming it and putting it into a reporting DW, and then they used the analysis service and SSRS. So SSRS was good, but it was not as in providing as insights as Power BI or bringing in ML into the mix. So we worked with a partner, with the customer. So we were able to bring the data. We still have for SQL, Azure SQL for restoring the point-click care, but we are able to directly pull the data from Palos to AOD into Azure Synapse through the pipelines, and also build their analytics data warehouse within Synapse, and have that ability to replace their SSRS report with more powerful report using Power BI. And we are also exploring some use cases on ML, where we are able to predict the number of patients and the duration of how much long the patients are going to stay within the hospital care. So some of very interesting stuff that's happening in Synapse, we are able to accelerate their insights. And as they got into Azure Synapse, now the customer is more inclined on building more and more insights and less worried about bringing data in and managing data within Synapse here. So Synapse provided greater flexibility, scalability. It provided resiliency because they had so many failure points. When you get data from an external source, there was always a failure point for them. So we were able to build a kind of more fault tolerant or robust system that will allow them to build more analytics on their healthcare data set. So Synapse provided that great simplified UI, and it also reduced their cost when we moved away from their infrastructure as a service to more platform as a service. It reduced their cost to more than 40% because the number of workload they run on Synapse, what they pay for is very limited. They're not paying for the services all the time. They only pay for what they are using. To summarize, today I went through like 3 scenarios where we talked about a greenfield where Microsoft have a large volume of data, and then they want to provide a real-time data analytics and provide the data set to their external customers. So how Synapse scaled for almost like 2.4 terabytes of data every time we are loading within 10 seconds of time, and then have that ability to query the data within half a second, like 500 milliseconds to query 50,000 rows from Spark Pool using hyperscale indexing was a huge leap that we gained through Synapse Spark Pool. And then the next use case was more about how we are able to consolidate all their repository, like they had 50 database, which were organically grown over a period of 30 years, and how we are able to bring all the data set into Synapse, into one data platform for them to collaborate and work together from different teams. And then on the healthcare, we had like this external data sources, and we were able to combine that external data source and bring it to Synapse, and the ability to replace SSRS with more Power BI reports and also bring the machine learning. One of the thing I would like to call was these customers, couple of customers didn't have the bandwidth to do this experiment. So we augmented a team to kind of parallelly try the Synapse along with their current application. So that's where we kind of collaborated with Microsoft as well. Let me talk about the next slide. So how do we engage with customers and partners? So before we do focus groups with our partners to understand where they are with their data platform, where they want to be, and what are the barriers for them to get into modernizing their data warehouse, whether it can be Synapse or any technology. We run like workshop, assessment, and kind of pilots, which are available through our marketplace on Azure. And we also collaborate with Microsoft to get funding and sandbox, because the customers or partners may not have the funds or may not have the time to kind of experiment and make the right choice of how they modernize their data platform. So thank you, everyone. And so Ahmed, still there? Ahmed Jesper?
I am here.
We are definitely still here, yes. Thank you for that run through, Prasad. That was a lot of content handled in a very short amount of time. I hope all of you guys are still there with us. I believe, Prasad, the next slide that you have is literally our question mark, correct? Because our Q&A session. Prasad, yes, there we go.
Before we get to that, Jesper, can we just wanted to just touch on one quick thing with some of the, if you can go back one slide previously there, just some of the things that we do with some of our partners is there's different ways that we work with our partners to help empower our customers. And one of the things we do is we do open hacks where we work with customers and partners for 1 or 2 days straight, where we sort of give out an open-ended problem, and we usually have a solution in hand, but we don't limit it to that solution. We try to give our customers and our partners an ability to try to solve it using the services that we have with some general guidelines. And a lot of that now is where we have one specifically that we do an open hack, which is for modern data warehousing, which is strictly for Azure Synapse, leveraging SQL Data Warehouse, leveraging Spark. And so that is one of the ones that we do that we find to be really helpful with our partners to kind of get their feet wet with Azure Synapse. And it's a good way to sort of just jump in there and try out the tool with an open-ended problem that we find to be very useful that most of our customers find to be using. So we do a lot of that within Microsoft. We work with our partners to do that. So that is something that be more than happy for us to share some information about with you guys about that afterwards.
Awesome. So just to pick up some of the questions that we had here, like I know we made good time here, and I know that you have been busy answering questions in the background here, Ahmed, while Prasad was talking. I don't know if there's a specific one that you wish to grab with regarding Azure Synapse, and then maybe the comparison between Azure Synapse and Azure Data Warehouse, if you want to grab that one.
Yeah, I'd be more than happy. There were several good questions that came in during the call. There's one that I'll pick up and Prasad, I'm sure you'll want to add some insights into that as well. So the question was basically, so Azure Synapse used to be Azure Data Warehouse. Can you alleviate my concerns about Microsoft changing the game again with Synapse to some other product and causing more growing pains in my solution? So yeah, I totally see where the customer is coming from. So yes, in a way, Azure Synapse is Azure Data Warehouse is now basically Azure Synapse, but Azure Data Warehouse as a product has not really changed. You're still leveraging Azure Data Warehouse. If you built a product with it, nothing is going to change. Nobody's going to tell you that you have to use Azure Synapse. And Azure Synapse is just a way of integrating Azure Data Warehouse more seamlessly with all the other services that used to come in before it. So if you look at the typical architecture that we have from Microsoft, the more modern architecture that we call the Lambda architecture, where we have data sources that are coming in from transactional like records, your unstructured data, maybe some database somewhere, maybe something coming from SAP. Usually, what we do is we land that data into a SQL data into an Azure data lake, using some type of an orchestration tool. We have something called Azure Data Factory that can do that. At that point, then you do some transformations with some type of a compute. Synapse Analytics with Spark would be one. Databricks would be another one, stuff like that, generally speaking. Then it would land into something that's more structured, more ready for traditional data warehousing. That's where Azure SQL Data Warehouse would land. That's still that framework and that architecture still exists today. And the only thing that's changed is that we've allowed for a more unified syncing of knowing where that data lake storage is, knowing where that compute is that's doing that transformation, and knowing where that landing zone is for that data warehouse. And maybe potentially there's some extra layers in there, maybe a database before a data warehouse for some staging. Maybe you have several different layers within your data lake for maybe pre-processing and post-processing. Well, none of that has changed, but except having to go into the Azure portal and do things separately. you now have it all sort of centralized in that location. So as far as changing the name, yes, the name may be changing, but the work that you've been doing with Azure SQL Data Warehouse is not changing. If you've been building a data warehouse now for several years and you're happy with it, you're able to bring that into Synapse if you'd like. If you would like to use that platform, if you want to continue with the way things are because things are working great, there really isn't anything holding you back from doing that. Prasad, you've worked directly with some of these. I don't know if you have any insights on that you'd like to share.
Yeah, I do agree with Ahmed that the technology, the underlying technology, I want to kind of combine this with another question that one of our audience has asked, Matt. So if you have used SSIS and if you're converting into Azure Data Factory, yes, there's a learning curve. If you're going into the Azure Data Studio, yes, there's a learning curve in doing that. But if you're already invested into the cloud and you have already started in your cloud journey in terms of leveraging Blob, leveraging Azure Data Lake, Gen 2, Gen 1, Gen 2. And as Ahmed said, if you're already into Azure Data Warehouse, nothing has majorly changed other than adding more and more feature set into the Azure cloud. But when you move from on-prem to cloud, yes, there is a learning curve involved. But Microsoft is trying to keep as much of compatibility as much as possible in migrating your jobs and bringing your data from on-prem to cloud. That's a huge, some part of learning curve. Once you get onto cloud, as Ahmed said, there's not a whole lot of things that are changing, but Microsoft is adding more value-add services and trying to bring your costs down and also reduce your OpEx in terms of using those technologies here. So if you're familiar with ADF, you will be very familiar with SQL Synapse pipeline. Like it should not take any time for you to use it. If you're familiar with Azure Data Warehouse, you should be able to jump on Synapse SQL and able to take advantage of the new features that are available in Synapse Studio. They're trying to bring everything in one place where people can collaborate and build more data platform and less worry about the operations and security part of it. So there is more security features that are coming in from Microsoft in their roadmap that's going to be more promising for bringing not only your enterprise scale data. We have known that enterprise scale data has always gone through high level, high grade, enterprise grade security. But when it comes to big data, there is not good solutions that are available that allow you to implement security. So Microsoft is trying to combine, like understanding that analytics cannot be built on just enterprise data. It has to be built on both enterprise and also your big data. So that's where they're trying to combine that into Synapse Analytics. So that's what I agree with Ahmed, and there's not a lot changing. There's another question: what if Microsoft changes this over a period of 10 years? Because we all understand through a lot of our focus group, we understood that data is gold for all the companies. Like when they bring their data, they want to make sure that their data stays in the platform for many years to come, and the technology is not changing. Yes, Microsoft Synapse Analytics is going to be the future for Microsoft, even though the name might change as one of the audience has posted. Still, the underlying technology is not going to change because Microsoft cares about their current customers and partners before building any new feature set.
Yeah, so picking up one of the other questions, I believe it was Dan that asked it. I even published it out here. It's like, how does the Spark pool scale? Like, does it scale automatically?
Yeah, Spark pool, you can set the number of nodes you wanted to configure, and it also allows you to automatically scale your clusters. So that kind of takes advantage of it's a setting that you do in your Azure Synapse that will allow you to scale your Synapse Spark pool. That you will only pay for what you use, but also provides you the ability to scale based on your needs.
Also, the ability to auto shut down after some idle time, so you're not paying for any dead time.
Brilliant. Right. Let's see. There's so many questions, and thank you everyone for asking all of this. It's super nice. So I've got another one for Kyle. He says, interesting technology. Do you have a high-level way to understand the payback for making another investment in data warehouse technology? might be a little difficult?
Yeah, so think of it this way. I would look at it like this. If you're building out, if you have a data warehouse right now as it is, and you don't have anything that's collaborative with it, it's just basically a standalone data warehouse, then you may not necessarily see the benefits of moving to Synapse right away. But if you're dealing with a data warehouse where you are constantly dealing with reporting that is required to come out of different sources that are not necessarily in the data warehouse, you want to be able to merge and join some of the files that you have in a data lake with some of the files that you have in a data warehouse, and do some machine learning, do some advanced analytics, and then within that advanced analytics, also pushing stuff into a data warehouse for reporting on that, along with creating side flows that may be pushing towards a Cosmos database that's going to be doing real-time reporting, some ML experiments, creating some APIs off of that. You might find the investment in trying that approach with Azure Data Warehouse within Synapse, excuse me. So it's more of a it's more of a collaboration process. So how can you put a price tag on collaboration? It kind of depends. It's not something that you can quantify directly, but there is that option of understanding how are my people working today, and within this whole digital transformation era that we're working in, and this COVID world, a lot of people are going to be working remotely as is, and so you want to keep that collaboration as unified as possible. So if you can put a price on that, then you can definitely see that if people are working remotely but are able to see the jobs that are occurring, you might find that you can eliminate some redundancy in some of those jobs that will be that could be of a cost value to you.
Yeah, I'd like to add something to that as well. Thank you, Ahmed. One of the need for data modernization when we work with partner is triggered by a lot of business justifications for them. Either it can be the data is growing larger, like like Gartner says, data is growing 40% every year, so they're not able to scale their infrastructure. So do you want to worry about maintaining and scaling your infrastructure, or you want to put that into a PaaS environment like Azure Synapse and let that take care of that and focus more on bringing intelligence on your data set? So we have seen like multiple trigger points for customers who are moving into the cloud, and I would classify them as for customers who for whom the data is growing, and for customers who want to combine the structured and the unstructured database together. And also, like, there are customers who needs insight, like they want to have predictive insights, they want to have more insights to gain more insights into their business, and they want to gain it real time. They don't want to wait for a batch process system to run at the end of the day and then get it over a report in the next day, and then all the executives are making decisions over the next day. So having Synapse allows you to have this limitless scale so that you don't need to worry about your infrastructure. It also reduces your cost of overall your OpEx, like you're not paying for what you're not using it. And then also, as Ahmed said, it also allows you to bring quick insights by quickly integrating your ML, by connecting with Power BI. So those are like the cool features. So we believe that Synapse is going to be the kind of one which kind of adds quick value in terms of customers adoption. Back to you, Jesper.
Thank you, Prasad. I know that Ahmed, you had another question that's been asked on numerous occasions that you really wanted to address just before we wrap up here. So yeah. I'm just gonna throw it over to you in the last minute here.
So I have about 1 minute. So one of the questions I often get asked is about leveraging Azure Databricks versus Azure Synapse in terms of Spark pools. Azure Databricks is obviously another great offering that we have within Azure. What I would say that Synapse, one of the options and the availabilities for it is that it's native towards Azure. First party offering. I mean, it's our product. Additionally, it gives you the ability to natively connect to a lot of the different sources that we have on Azure without having to go through some template coding, which can be difficult for some people starting out. So we make that barrier to entry to Spark specifically very low in Synapse. So it's easily accessible. Databricks is still a great tool, great offering, but for Azure Synapse, it's a really low barrier to entry to leveraging Spark if you've been always looking to use it as an organization, but just haven't had a chance to. We really make that we really make it very feasible for customers to get in there if they're looking to do some simple distributed workloads.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ahmed, and thanks everyone for joining us here today on our webinar on Azure Synapse. If you guys have any questions or any follow-up that you would like to ask our panel or speakers or whatnot, then by all means just send us an email on I believe it mostly my email, like Jesper Olsen at FyrSoft.com. That particular one, and then I'll be sure to get back to you with any response that you guys need. And yeah, as well as Ahmed just put down in the live event Q&A section, you're also very welcome to reach out to him personally to get some more detailed information from him. And I think with that said, I just want to thank everyone for taking an hour out of your busy schedule and joining us here today. And again, a big thanks to Prasad and Ahmed for gracing us with their presence here as well and giving us some of their experience. Right.
Yeah, thank you, Ahmed.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right.